questions that are being asked I'd like to mostly address, so this is my preference, is questions that affect how you walk, questions about living this out. What he's always told me is, tell them that if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, they'll be where they're supposed to be. But you need a teacher to teach you what it is you need to be doing. All right, this is the Zone 1 meeting for July. We are in the zone. Okay, so the way this works is we have a little less than 2 hours, which means that I'll try to split it up between the online and here as evenly as I can. Okay, try to keep the questions to one question at a time, because some of you will come up and have 5 of them, and you'll just have to get back in line. That'll make it fair. Okay, let's see what we get done. We may have a lot of questions, we may not. So if you're online, start typing them in. Shamash Rob is right there ready to take note of them, so that we'll go to him and he'll get to read your questions off as soon as we get that turn. So we're gonna start here with Mr. John.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning.
I know you answered part of this question, but my father pretty much was talking about something yesterday. He said that the ordinance of the law was nailed to the cross, and that all the stuff was done to the family. The head of the family had to be making all the decisions in that because the veil was torn. Now I want to understand what your point of view of that would be.
Okay, well, you asked like several things all at the same time. And Ben, can you make this louder over here, the monitors? Thank you. All right, so let's start with the second part first. I think we can all understand and agree that very few people listening right now or in any church anywhere on a Sunday have any idea what the makeup of the tabernacle was actually like. Can we agree? Okay? I mean, if they go through the book of Numbers and the book where they describe the building of it and all that, or in Leviticus, etc., where they're describing it, I'm sure they fall asleep, glaze over, and like most of us probably would, with how many poles and how much cloth and how many hooks and how much, there was more than one veil. That's first and foremost. Now, it says that they could see the veil tear from where they were with Yeshua, right? Well, that would not have been the Holy of Holies veil. They could never have seen that far into the building to see that. It was the first veil. And so that veil would have been right there towards the outside on the outside of the building to go into that next court. And so that was the veil that would have separated those who were Tameh and those who were Gentile from being able to come in. That was this, because remember, Ephesians is talking about these things that separated the enmity between the world, the Goyim, and the covenanted Israelite. And there was an enmity, there was a separation between so that they can come into one. Let's look at that in Ephesians, just so we are clear, all right? In Ephesians 2, it says, we'll begin in verse 11. It says, therefore remember that you once Gentiles, so we're talking to people saying you were once Gentile, which means as a Gentile there were things that you could not do vertically connected, because it's a relationship that is reserved for those that are covenanted. He says, so when you were Gentiles in the flesh, those who were called the uncircumcision by those who are called circumcision, in other words, those in the Jewish community referred to you as the uncircumcised. Or they could have called you Goyim or Gentiles. He says that at that time, the time when you were a Gentile, which by the way, that means that you're no longer a Gentile if you are now part of the believing covenanted community. So just to understand, I know that wasn't the question, but there is no such thing as a Gentile believer. You are no longer a Gentile if you are a covenanted believer. He's saying at that time when you were, he says, therefore remember that you once were a Gentile, which now has the indication that if you were something that you're not anymore. He doesn't say, don't forget you are a Gentile, but now you're a Gentile believer instead of a Gentile not believer. He says, no, you were a Gentile. And at that time, you were without Messiah, excluded from the citizenship of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no expectation, without Elohim in the world. That's what Gentiles have. He also told you a little bit of what Gentiles who become believers get to have. They get to have Messiah. They get to have citizenship and all of the things that go along with it. And they get Elohim. He says, but now, in Messiah Yeshua, who once was far off, has been brought near by the blood of Messiah. You who were once far off are brought near by the blood of Messiah. For he is our peace, who has made both one. Both one. What's the both? The Jew and the Gentile. The Israelite and the Gentile. He's made both one because you've been drawn near, and now you have Messiah. You have covenant, which makes you a citizen of Israel. Go listen to the teaching, Discovering Your Identity. He says, he's made both one, having broken down the partition of the barrier between the two. Not between you and God, but between you and the Gentile, or the Gentile, you and the Israelite. Because you have to know what Paul struggles with his congregations. The same thing all the early believers dealt with. This battle between Jew and Gentile believers. And this idea that we're proper citizens and you're second-class citizens, or we're this and you're that. This still goes on, by the way, in Messianic Jewish congregations. The idea of being almost like a second-class citizen is of the Jew first, after all. First isn't meaning of the Jew first, meaning in hierarchy of preference. It's of the Jew first, meaning literally in order the Jews had it first and now you're getting it. It's simply an order of chronology, so to speak. It's not an order of the Jew is above. All Israelites are the same. It's a citizenship choice, and it makes no difference what you are. And by the way, Paul makes a really strong case for the Jew that doesn't act like a Jew but acts like a Gentile. Might as well just be a Gentile because his circumcision doesn't avail him anything. In other words, being born a Jew. And whenever Paul uses the word circumcision and uncircumcision, he's simply referring to what you were born. Were you born into or not born into the covenant? Right? The circumcised child was circumcised on the 8th day and born into this. Those not born into this are not circumcised on the 8th day, so they're referred to as the uncircumcision. So, when we're talking about the veil, the barriers, these things that are broken down, it was between the Jew and the Gentile. It wasn't between you and the Holy of Holies or you and God and any of those kind of things. That was not what happened here. All right? Now, so what did he do? He said he abolished in his flesh the enmity. What did Yeshua actually take with him to death on the stake? He took the enmity between those two groups. In other words, he took the reasons for them to be enemies with him. He didn't take their anger with him and their thinking of each other's enemy. He took the excuses and their reasonings for why they could no longer be equally brothers together, but that there was this adversity between them. Because that barrier had been taken away. Okay, and then he says the Torah of commands and dogma. In other words, the man-made rules about what makes us so separate. Because, Israel was told to be set apart. We're going to teach more about that next week. But being set apart doesn't mean that you can't have any interaction with somebody, especially who's no longer going to be out there but wants to be in here, right? From outside the camp to inside the camp. But what was happening is anybody who wanted to come inside the camp was treated like they were still outside the camp. Jews today still make it really, really hard for someone to convert to Judaism because they really don't want you to do it. You have to want it with everything because they really don't want you to do it. I told you, the one thing that Jew and Gentiles agree on is that the Torah is not for you. And so this was not a new thing today. It's a thing that goes back easily to before Yeshua even walked on, because this was going on way before he showed up. But when he showed up, this was, in full-blown effect. And so he abolished these things, so what? For the reason. What's the reason? To create in himself. Why would it say in himself? Because we're told that he is the head of the body. He is the body. So if you're going to be in him, and a Gentile's now going to be in him, and a Jew's now going to be in him, or anybody's going to be in him, he's creating in himself one. renewed man from the two. That's how you know it's not just talking about your sin. You had only two sins? Or there was only two laws? No, he's reconciling in himself the two. Which two? The uncircumcision and the circumcision, the Jew and the Gentile. He's reconciling them in himself to make one renewed man from the two, thus making peace. Oh, so the problem wasn't necessarily peace between him and, or you and God, you and Elohim. It was peace among brothers. He says, you guys need to stop fighting with each other. You're now one in me. Knock it off. He said, and to reconcile fully both of them unto Elohim in one body. To reconcile them fully, to restore them to favor, to reconcile them fully, to have both of them now unto one body in Elohim. Both of them unto Elohim in one body, through the stake, having destroyed the enmity. He didn't destroy sin or the law. He destroyed the problem between us that was our excuse. Oh, well, I'm a chosen person and you're a Gentile. Or I'm a Gentile and I believe in Yeshua and you're a Jew, you're doing all that other stuff, whatever. They had this thing going back and forth. Each group had its reasons why they thought they were the right one, the special one, the chosen one. You still have that today when you see the way the church feels and the way the Jews feel. No different today. They don't understand it. Messiah, when you come to Messiah, destroys that division. Right? Destroys that division. Because in him there should be no enmity between the two groups. Not between you and him. You and him are always going to have, you and the Father are always going to have enmity when you sin. He didn't take that away. You sin, you still are an adversary and an enmity to him. So hopefully that answered your question, John, when you're talking to people. See, they're not understanding several very basic things. If you let the verse say what it says, which is hard to do when you're living in a delusional bubble, and I'm not picking on anybody. You all were there too. We were all there, all of us, me, you, everybody, where you did not see what you see now. You read the same words. Doesn't matter what translation. You still read the same words, basically, and it did not have any more understanding for you then than it does for these people. That's why it has to be explained. By the way, that's why you need a teacher. We just went through some Torah portions. I'm going to teach a little bit for a second. All right, we just went through Torah portions, and one of the Torah portions talked about Moses and the anointing from Moses being then put on 70. And their job being, when the anointing was put on the 70, to then be able to answer questions and share and do the instructing that was supposed to be done that Moses had been doing. And as we read about the 70, okay, then that 70, bear in mind, was going out and prophesying. They were speaking the word with authority. 70. Do you know that eventually there was a body, actually I think it started with that 70, called the Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin was the legal body to make all decisions Torah-wise, halachic. The Sanhedrin was made up of how many? 70. Okay? 71, actually, because there was the one called the Nasi, the prince or the president presiding over, and that was Moses. So there was Moses plus 70. So 71. Okay? And then we get to like Deuteronomy 17, where in Deuteronomy 17 we have the decision-making body having to make rulings. It says when there's a matter in verse 8 that rises too hard for you to judge, you don't know what to do. Well, why would that come up? Don't we all know Torah? Isn't Torah simple and basic? Can we just all understand the instructions? Because you're thinking when a matter comes up because you don't know which witness to believe. That's not what it's talking about here. It's about not knowing what the right way to apply the Torah is. Then you go to the Sanhedrin. That doesn't say that, but it does. You're going to go to the judges, the priests, the Levites, those who stand before Yahweh to serve, and you're going to inquire. This was always designed to need teaching. In other words, you were never supposed to understand this fully without help. Absolutely, a whole bunch of it he expects you to understand. Not that you would need every little thing explained, but there were going to be situations that would come up where you would need guidance, clarification. And he says, look, when you go to the leadership and they declare to you what to do of the right ruling, it says very specifically, in verse 10, it says, and you shall do according to the words that they declare to you from that place, and you shall guard to do according to all that they instruct you. Because they're going to declare the word of the right ruling at the end of verse 9. Do according, verse 11, to the Torah in which they teach you, according to the right ruling which they say to you, and do not turn to the left or the right from the word which they declare to you. And the man who acts presumptuously, arrogantly, as to not listen to the priest who stands to serve there before Yahweh your Elohim, and or to the judge, whoever the leadership is, that's in the Sanhedrin body, he said, that man shall die. This is strong stuff. I think it's very important that we understand that. So, when you're talking to family members, first of all, always remember, if their bubble isn't popped, it's going to be very hard for them to understand, even if you answer them correctly. I shouldn't say hard to understand. I'm not saying they're stupid. It'd be hard for them to receive. Remember, revelation, and let's not talk about revelation meaning like some monumental thing. Revelation meaning something being revealed. Okay? Something you don't know being revealed to you. That revelation has to be received to be of any value. So you can reveal something to your father, your mother, your sister, your brother, whoever it is. If they can't receive it, it is of no use to them. Don't get frustrated, because they can't receive unless he, the Creator, opens their eyes and their ears and their hearts to receive it. That's the part you can't do. He has to do that. So it's a great question. And that's why we need to have those teachings. And by the way, I've taught this part in Ephesians 2, I don't know, out of 600 teachings, probably on a third of them. It comes up a lot. Maybe not that many, maybe 10 or 15%. I mean, I would say out of 600 teachings, at least 40, 50 teachings, this verse gets mentioned and explained most of the time. See, but we don't understand, because we think that when we were Gentiles, but we were in the church, we had this relationship that we thought we had. No, Paul just said you did not have. You were a Gentile. No, but we believed the Messiah, not this Messiah. Not this way. Because Yeshua said, the proof of your belief in me is you guard my commands. You believe in me, you do what I say. You love me, you guard my commands. So you said you loved him, you thought you knew him, but you didn't guard his commands, then you actually are going to be the Lord, Lord, we did all this in your name. And he says, well, I don't have a relationship with you that you think I have. Always remember, and I've said this many times, your relationship that you have or don't have with him is only what he thinks it is, not what you think it is. In other words, you may think you have something with him, but if he doesn't, you don't. And don't tell me you don't know what that's all about. All of you at some point when you were younger, or some of you may be younger now, you liked somebody and you thought they liked you back and you thought you had a relationship only to find out that was in your head. They weren't thinking the same thing you were thinking. Oh, but I thought we were like going in this direction and that we were, no. That person just didn't understand that all of the attention they were giving you was giving you the wrong message. And so, whether or not you have that relationship with the person is not just what you think, it's what they think. So you may think you have a great marriage going on, but if your spouse doesn't think so, then you don't. You may think you have a great relationship with your child, but if your child doesn't think so, you don't. Both of you have to be on the same page. Oh, but I was so close with Messiah. You thought you were. It felt like you were, to you. But he defines what being close to him is. Being close to him is a relationship of covenant, which is obedience and submission and trust in what he says. And you didn't. And it wasn't your fault, because you couldn't, because nobody taught you to do it. They told you you didn't have to do it. So again, it's not your fault. But that's why he, in his mercy, at some point pops your bubble and says, now I will show you how to have a relationship with me. Now we're going to become close if you choose to come close. You need to draw near to him, and he will draw near to you, right? James tells us that. I think it's in chapter 4, all right, of James, right? Draw near to Elohim, and he will draw near to you. But you draw near by doing the things that he says draw you near. So that was a long answer to the question, but I think it was a good question to help us kind of cover a lot of things, because the main group of people I hope to help in these zone ones are the newer people dealing with a lot of newer things, or helping you with your struggles with your family members. Just realize, please don't argue with them. They can't receive most of what you're going to try to share with them. It's not their fault. They just can't until he pops their bubble. And so be patient with them. Try your best, or just say, look, we're just going to have to agree to disagree at this point because we're not speaking the same language. All right? And they'll say, oh, no, come on, I can understand, but they can't. It's straightforward and says the enmity between the two groups of people has nothing to do, not a single thing in Ephesians has anything to do with the law. He never mentions the law. He's not talking about the law. He's not talking about your sin either. None of that's in there. Not in the section that we read. Okay, so let's just make sure that we're not confusing those issues. Now, the rest of the chapter does the same thing. He talks about, in chapter 2, he says, so then you are no longer strangers and foreigners, in verse 19, but fellow citizens of the set-apart ones. That's what that was all about. Chapter 2, he's making a case. You were here. Now you're here. And now that you're here, all this stuff that you had no access to over here, you now have access to. You were Gentile. You were no Messiah, no Elohim, no covenant, no promises, nothing. Now you're over here with Messiah, with covenant, with the promises, fellow citizens with the others. That's the whole point of the chapter. It had nothing to do with Torah and wiping it out or not wiping it out. Doesn't say that anywhere. Okay? All right. Next question. Okay, Kathy.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
Shabbat Shalom.
On the thing that you were just talking about the circumcision and the uncircumcision, or the ones born into and the ones that are seeking to graft it into, the Gentiles, is that the same? Because when I was in the other system, that's how I viewed it. But then in Ezekiel, when it talks about the two sticks, but is that sort of the same thing, because he's scattered the northern tribes and his word has gone out in the world, and then whomsoever will can choose. So is that the Gentile coming in? And I was thinking, well, that they have enmity against each other, the northern tribes and the southern tribes. And now that we're in the mix,
look, is
it the same or different?
Well, yes and no. And the reason I say yes and no is that I don't want us to fall into what some of the two-house movement tries to teach, which tries to make the case that the Gentiles are Ephraim or the church and the Jews are the Jews, and that's your two houses. Paul makes the point, and I think this will clarify it. When we look at Ezekiel, okay, Ezekiel's talking about the two split kingdoms coming back together. Ezekiel 37, right? The two sticks of Ezekiel 37. And so you got the stick that is Jacob or Ephraim and the stick of Judah, and they come together. Now, because they are scattered, especially the stick of Ephraim is scattered, right? The 10 tribes are scattered everywhere. Paul makes the case that you are a goyim, no matter what you were born, based on your behavior. Okay? So yes, while the gathering is basically bringing Gentiles in and grafting into Jews, because the Jews have to still come to Messiah too. So they're both kind of moving towards the Messiah, towards the shaft of the stick, okay, where the two sticks are coming together, the root of the stick. But when the gathering is happening, it's a way to get the message I shouldn't say it's a way. When you're getting the message out to everyone, it's a way also to reach those that are not actually Israelites. In other words, all true Gentiles get to hear the word too. And the whomsoever wills get to join in and graft in. And so in Romans 11, we have the same idea where he's trying to talk about even those that were broken off can graft back in. And so the gathering process also includes those are the whomsoever wills that are in scattered Israel, as well as the whomsoever wills that were never Israel but decide they want to now join and change citizenship. And so, yes, there was an animosity or an enmity between Judah and Israel, like the northern and southern kingdoms. And there's also the animosity between both of those and everybody else. Lots of animosity going on. Lots of people at enmity to each other. But all of that is supposed to be put to death and put down to find the shalom, the peace of Messiah. And so when we look at the 2 6 coming together, let's not try to pigeonhole who's with which. You've got Jews that need to come in that are not, like I grew up with a very, very large community of secular Jews. So they weren't even keeping Torah. They weren't doing anything. They were just born Jewish, like, because it's a tribe as well as a religion, right? A belief system. And so being born anything, scripturally, we find out, really doesn't mean anything. What it does mean, I guess, on some levels is an expectation. If you were born a certain thing, he expected you to do certain things with that. But it doesn't avail you anything if you haven't done anything with it. Which is why Paul says, notwithstanding your circumcision, if you act like an uncircumcised, then your circumcision might as well have been uncircumcision. And so, does that answer the question?
Yes, I just had one little tweak follow-up. So, but eventually, we're all going through one of those 12 gates. So we will...
You will get assigned to a tribe.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
I don't know how and when that plays out, but when you do get to that point where Yeshua is reigning on and sitting on the throne in Jerusalem, et cetera, I believe at some point in there, you will be told that you're of Zebulun and you're of Dan and you're of, Issachar and you're of Joseph. And you'll be told what tribe you're in, because there are 12 gates for the 12 tribes. And we also have the 12 sitting on the thrones judging the 12 tribes, the apostles, et cetera. So you have it all based on these 12. So I think that it is absolutely likely that you will be assigned to a tribe. However, I'm not a big supporter of those who think that they had some inspiration and know what tribe they're from. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I don't know. Okay? I would say that's a non-issue, and that I don't spend a lot of energy trying to figure out, what tribe you genetically came from, if you came from one. Because the odds of you all having some Israelite blood in you is very high. I've explained this in the Discovering Your Identity teaching. When you consider, and I'll say it this way for those who've never heard it. If you consider the U.S. has existed for just a little over 220 whatever years, right? I mean, it's since 1776. So it's only 200 plus years. It's not a lot of years in history, right? I mean, it's not. Okay, so, or 250 years almost, whatever, okay? What did you say, 46? You give me the exact number? Okay, all right. So that's a small amount of time historically. So in 200 plus years, are there very many places on the planet you can go and not find, quote unquote, American seed? In other words, Americans had been there and left some of their descendants and in other words, created babies and left them there. In other words, you go to almost any country, you can find somebody with relations, descendants going back into being American blood somewhere, right? It's like when all of you guys do the, 24 and these other genetic things where you can go ahead and, 22, right? Whatever it is, all those 23, 27, going once, going twice. Do I hear 30? All right. When you do the genetic stuff, I'm a rabbi, not a geneticist. But when you do that stuff, doesn't it tell you you've got like 75 different places that you have kind of connected to in your history? You're part this, and you're part that, and you're part this. So imagine if someone's doing that, and they live like, let's say, in Europe, and they find out that they have part American. Or they live in the Far East, and they're part American. They live anywhere, and they're part that's only after 200 years, 246. Okay? It's not a long period of time. So imagine since the northern kingdom got taken away. Well, that's more than 200 years. It's more than 2,000 years. So what are the odds that they have interacted with genetically and generationally with enough people that most people on the planet probably have some connection genetically to that? Okay? I'm not talking about those people that have been living isolated for, how many ever generations. But I'm saying the odds are that there's a really good chance, and it's irrelevant, that you have that. So let's not worry about that. And besides, the way that the mixing has been going on for so many years, you may have from 3 or 4 different tribes in your lineage somewhere. So how do you know which one you're going to be assigned to? So all these people going through, the Father revealed to me I'm from Zebulon. Well, okay, good for you. I don't know. What does that do for you? If it means that you now feel more like an Israelite, well, then that's foolish. You shouldn't need that to feel more like an Israelite. You should feel 100% like an Israelite when you covenanted, okay? You covenant in Messiah, in the Torah, you do all that, you should feel 100% like an Israelite. I'm sure that Ruth, a Moabitess, felt 100% Israelite when she basically converted and said, your Elohim is my Elohim, your people, my people, your ways, my ways. She didn't feel like a Moabite anymore. And she didn't have any lineage that she could lean on of any quality. But she made a choice. That's what you need to worry about and focus on is the choice you make. Amen? Amen. All right, Shira.
Thank you, Rabbi Steve. I always appreciate it when you go into how we didn't realize as Christians that we didn't have the relationship we thought we had, and that Father's the one that decides what the relationship is. And kind of hanging on to the coattails of that, I wondered if we could go into a little bit the very mysterious and delicate drawing process that the Father exerts upon us, because I know in conversing with so many others who came out of deep Christianity, talk about the deep state. We were where Billy was at. We were in the deep state. But we were spinning our wheels, and at the point where he picked us up and popped our bubble, we knew that we were spinning our wheels, but we also had a certain kind of quote-unquote relationship in that he used his goodness, his kindness. He was nice to us. He answered our prayers. We thought, he's a good God. And so for many of us, I think, who came from that background, when he popped our bubble, he spoke to us, and we knew the voice. And, like he did with me, he said, I would appreciate it if you'd come celebrate my Shabbats with me. And I know that voice. And so it's a very delicate to me and mysterious process, and I think that it's been so valuable for me. When you say you didn't have the relationship you thought you had, amen. I get it. But it's also, the thought comes to me, I wonder how many other former Christians are out there hearing rabbis say this and kind of in this murky place of, well, what did I have when he called me? Because I'm sure I heard him call me. Can you talk about that? Sure,
no problem. All right, so let's understand that I can't answer that question in a strong, definitive way, because I don't know what relationship anybody has. None of you do. Look, it's very hard to know what he either caused or allowed in your life to give you at least some information about him, okay? In a sense, a lot of the Jewish community falls into that category because they have a relationship with him to some degree, but they don't, because they don't receive Messiah the way that they should. And so I'm just telling you that when we read this, it says that then when you were a Gentile, you were strangers from the covenants of promise, having no expectation and without Elohim. I don't know what that means. Now, when you had your bubble popped, he could have popped your bubble, and I've spoken to people who had their bubbles popped who'd never been in a church. So getting your bubble popped has nothing to do with where you came from. And by the way, it doesn't necessarily make it any easier. Matter of fact, it might be harder if you went through the church to let go of some of that confusion. Okay? And yes, things did happen in the church, and you're not going to like this answer, but sometimes it wasn't the Father doing it. It was the other side doing it, just to make you feel like you're in the right place. And that doesn't feel good to hear that. But you got to remember that system is in place because the one who put it in place had an agenda to keep you from the truth. And so you got blessings and you got answers, and they weren't always from Elohim. Now bear in mind, if it came from the wrong source, the Father still either caused or allowed. So at the very least, he allowed it. What I want you to do is not worry about wherever it is you came from. I know that it hurts and this and that because you had so much emotion, because the church is about emotion, connected to that relationship. And then when I say something, it triggers an offense to that emotion. What matters is that whatever your journey was, and some of you had some really horrible journeys, you're here. Some of you had less horrible journeys, but you're here. And did you have whatever level of relationship? I don't know. He knows. What matters is when you were in the church, you received something that the worldly people who are not, at least in the church, and Judaism, one of those two, we received something that they didn't receive, is you believed that the word in this book is the word. So you received the scripture. You received the understanding that there is a creator God. So you learned certain things about him that the world doesn't believe. And so those were things that made you more prepared than when you had your bubble popped to understand who was popping your bubble. So you had a relationship, at least with certain amounts of information. But when you say, but he answered our prayer and he did this, I don't know what he did and didn't do. Okay? I know that you did have prayers answered. I'm glad they were. A lot of them were big prayers and serious things and healings and relationships and coming out of lifestyles. And so I'm glad those prayers got answered. I'm not going to sit here and say that I have any idea who or what or how they got answered. That's just not right for me to try to do. But I know you're upset that I'm even hinting it could be anybody but the Father. But you're not understanding your scriptures because you still want to see Satan as this red-tailed, red-horned, monster when he would look to you like Yeshua the Father himself if you met him. And you don't want to believe that. He offered Yeshua some amazing things. Yeshua never laughed at him and said, you can't do that. He simply said, it'd be wrong for me to take them from you. So apparently haSatan can offer some pretty powerful things and has some ability to bless and to answer prayer and to make you feel like what he wants you to feel like is that he is Elohim himself. I know that doesn't feel nice to know. It doesn't feel good to think that you may have been entertaining and interacting with, the adversary. But all of us did. So don't feel bad. What does it say about haSatan? He has what? Deceived a few people? It says the whole world. So this is haSatan who has deceived the whole world. So you were deceived. I was deceived. We all were deceived. The whole world. Nobody. One person was not deceived. Yeshua. Okay? Everybody else. But of course it says he deceived the whole world. Yeshua was not of the world. But the world has been deceived. We are of the world. And we're trying to no longer be of the world and now be just in the world and not of the world. But we came from being of the world. We've been deceived. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. Stop worrying about the past. The past is part of how you got here. That's fine. Focus on where you are now. Right now, you understand every word that's coming out of my mouth. You understand the scriptures in a way you never did before, which is every word coming out of his mouth, which hopefully they're the same thing, what I'm saying and what you're reading. And that's what matters. That you're no longer, as he says, remember, you were therefore, remember that you once were Gentiles, but now you're not. Because now you have been drawn near and brought near by the blood of Messiah. So then why do we worry about the other things? Don't you think that these people all thought they had some sort of relationship with whatever their God was? Of course they did. And so let's not overly react to that. Hopefully we can receive that. What matters is that you're heading in the right direction now, in a right relationship, and you understand what defines that relationship, which you never understood before. Okay? All right? Very good.
Rabbi, I have a question about cremation, whether it is right or wrong. I have not found anything specific in the Word yet, anyway. I have read where basically cremation was reserved for the evil. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. This is a very common question that comes up, and these are the typical type of things that I like to have come up in the zone meetings because they're very functionally important to a lot of people. A lot of you have already heard me answer this many times, okay? But I'm going to answer it here for you. Okay, number one, when we look at things that are from the context of Scripture, one of the things that you must start off with is how much control do you have over it? Because you're responsible to walk out your own salvation. In other words, that which you have control over. Yes or no? Okay. So, do you actually have any control over what happens to you after you die? Oh, but my children will do exactly what I thought. They won't. They might, but they won't. You can't trust that. They're going to make a financial decision or an emotional decision or whatever their belief system decision is, no matter what you ask them to do. Oh, but I'm going to put it in my will. They're not going to read that till you've been dead for a month. Because they're going to find it and pull it out, and it's already going to be too late. So first of all, we can't believe that it matters that which you can't control. That's number one. So since you can't control it, it doesn't matter. That's number one. Now, what about as far as taking it from what if you want to or choose to and these kind of things? Well, first of all, I don't know why you're choosing anything. I would just allow my children to do whatever they do. I would leave them money to do it, make sure they have some way to pay for it, and do whatever they do. I will be dead. It doesn't really matter to me, right? Why should it matter to you? You're dead. Secondly, when we look at cremation, we're thinking, well, they're burning the body. And so does that mean everybody that burned in a fire or blew up in a war where they were blown up by something that was an incendiary, bomb of some sort, and they were burned up, that they're somehow in trouble because they died by fire? Of course not. And so we can't just say, well, that the idea of burning the body then is the problem. Yahweh doesn't need that body. If he did, we'd all be in trouble because everybody that ever lived is now dust. If they're more than so many years dead, they're decomposed and there's nothing. There is no body. And so let's keep that in mind when we're looking at these things. Number one, is this something I actually have control over? And the answer is no. I had a friend who passed away who adamantly did not want to be cremated, and they cremated him. Okay? And I tried to convince him that he should calm down about that before he died. I said, look, you're not going to be able to control this. Cremation is such a small percentage, price-wise, of what a full funeral costs, that most people make that decision these days if there's any financial issue at all. Because getting a casket and a whole burial thing is unbelievably expensive. It's insane. All right? And so, my father, it's now almost a year since he passed, and we're going to be getting the headstone to put and everything the way my mother wants to do. The stone itself, to have a stone made and carved, is thousands of dollars. Thousands. Doesn't cost all that much to cremate, put the ashes in an urn, and that's it. And you can put that wherever you put it, or do whatever. And so, no, it is absolutely okay. I personally, because it's an emotional, look, when you die, everything that happens afterwards is about the people that are here. So I would let them do whatever they need to do to process your loss, your being gone. They're losing you. And if they want to have a funeral or they don't want to have a funeral, if they want to have a big party, if they want to have whatever they want to do, allow them to do it. That's their thing. Why would you care? Oh, but I don't want them to. Why? Why do you need to control? You will be already asleep. You'll have graduated out of this craziness. Why would you want to still be trying to impose yourself on it? Does that make sense? Did that answer the question? Okay, good. All right, Steve.
All right, this is for somebody else who asked me to check on this. What about, I guess they're implying physical healings like we're supposed to be able to do like Yeshua did. But to me, I believe that if we're not emotionally healthy or we're not spiritually healthy, that's going to affect us physically. So how does that all intertwine to being able to deal in that area?
All right. This brings us to another sort of core kind of understanding that's needed. We have to be careful when we look at Scripture that we're not universalizing something that was specific. In other words, globalizing something that was for only a few people. Yeshua told his disciples that they would do greater things than he did. He didn't say that everybody that believes in him would do greater things than he did, or everybody would heal, and everybody would. He said, you guys are going to do signs and wonders as you launch your ministries, just like I did, and even more. And by greater, it's by volume, not by impressiveness. They were just going to do a whole lot more. Why? There was 12 of them. There was one of him. And so they were going to do a lot more. And so there is no requirement or expectation that we're going to have people today healing everybody the way the apostles did. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen and can't happen. It just means that it's not what the Scripture was talking about. And so when Sarah is told she's going to be pregnant after being barren, that's not a promise for you. That doesn't mean Yahweh may not heal you if you're barren and give you a baby. It's just that you're not going to demand and say, well, you promised Sarah, so you promised, so it's the same as for me. That's not. You can ask and say, can you do for me like you did for Sarah? But it's not like because Christianity loves to use the phrase, I'm standing on this promise. What promise? Was the promise actually for you? There are promises that are for everybody. You can stand on those. There's not a whole lot of them that are that specific, though. The specific ones were for specific people. And so just realize, it's just like when they're sent out at the end of Matthew. The 12 were told to go make disciples of the nations, not everybody. They were trained and sent out to do what they were trained to do. All right, Chris?
Hi. I had a question about the priesthoods, the Melchizedekian versus the Levitical. And so in, of course, Genesis 49, you say that...
What verse?
In 49, verse...
what book you in?
Genesis, sorry.
Genesis 49.
Yeah,
okay.
49. Verse 9, verse 10. Yeah, the scepter shall not turn aside from Yehuda. Mm-hmm. And you know that scepter and the inscribers, the Hukim, so they will have that kind of teaching. And...
That the scepter is connected to the Hukim? Is that what you said?
I think in the teaching, I remember you talking about the Hukim as being something that Judah was, like you look to Judah for the, like how to wear a seat but you use the word Hukim, it was connected to that word.
All right, well, let's understand. The scepter wasn't one of those things that are like, the scepter is authority. Okay, so it says that the authority shall not turn aside from Judah, nor a law teacher, a teacher of the law, from between his feet. Now, the Chukim, which we're going to look at this week as Torah portion Chukat, are basically laws, ordinances, regulations that Yahweh puts out there that are only Peshat to him. In other words, Peshat means a simple, straightforward understanding. Well, he looks at it, it's simple and straightforward. We look at it and we're like, okay, I get what to do. I'm not really understanding why, but it is what it is, right? Like, why do we need a red heifer to do anything? Well, but we do. Makes sense to him, and we kind of scratch our heads, and we go, okay, I don't know. And so that's what we're talking about. So when we run into things, like even in Deuteronomy 17, but we really run into things that we really don't know what to do, and it's not always the Chukim type things, but it could be anything that's, it tells us what to do, but it doesn't give us much detail. See, the seat is not a Chukim type of thing where we don't understand it. We know exactly what the seat are all about. What we don't know is exactly what they're supposed to look like because he doesn't tell us. He says, make one of the strands blue. Doesn't tell us how many strands. It doesn't tell us anything else. And so that's the kind of stuff that we then look to the lawgivers, the teachers of the law, the Jewish community, and say, well, by the way, you've been doing this forever. How do you do this? That's what I said.
Okay. Yeah, I messed that up a bit.
That's okay.
But in Leviticus chapter 10, verse 10 and 11, it's talking to Aaron. Yahweh's talking to Aaron. And he says, so as to make a distinction between the set apart and the profane, between the unclean and the clean. So that's like Ezekiel 22, like the priest to do that.
Yep.
And to teach the children of Israel all the laws which Yahweh has spoken to them by the hand of Moshe.
Right.
And so I find in this, and also in Deuteronomy 33 and Malachi as well, there's a mention of what seems to be the Levitical priesthood being teaching. And I know that you talk about the Levites, that priesthood being for judgments and the ritual offerings.
So who's going to teach the Israelites the Levitical stuff? In other words, when to come to the temple, what to bring to the temple, how much to bring, what sort. See, they're teaching the stuff that has to do with their stuff. Okay? Does that answer the question? Okay? So he's saying, look, you're going to teach the children of Israel all the laws which Yahweh has spoken to them by the hand of Moshe, okay, about, this is the book of Leviticus, about temple service, about all of these things. Now, they also could teach other things as well, but ultimately, the Sanhedrin, the decision-making halachic body, was the 70. And that's the separation between the two. Okay? But the halakhic body wasn't going to have any halakhic issues with temple service. Temple service was a Levitical problem. If you had something to go to the temple for, the priest would make that decision. If you had something to be judged, like a blemish on your skin, whether or not it was sarat or leprosy or whatever, you would go to the priests. And so that was their area of judgment. Okay? And so from a court system point of view, they could, now, but here's the thing that I guess for clarification. It seems like from what we read in the sages and the historians that the Sanhedrin was made up of 3 groups of people, okay, when they got to the point where they were formally making the Great Assembly in the Sanhedrin. You had 23 from the Kohanim, you had 23 from the Levitical, from the priests, and you had 23 from the rest of the Israelites. Now, some of you are thinking that's only 69. I know I couldn't get 246, but I can get to 69. Okay? And so, of course, then you had the 70th one, which is known as the Av Bet Din, which was the sort of the second in command to the Nasi. So then there was 71. And by the way, the 71 was the Melchizedekian, or the prince. That was where Moses' position. Okay? And so, yes, in those areas of judgment, the priests had input. But the priests were in the temple doing temple service most of the time, unless they were brought into a court case or they were brought in. The general teaching of the people out there in the expanse of Israel was done by the 70 and who they trained. Okay, so hopefully that kind of clarifies, okay? We'll be doing at some point a lot more on this because I think that, as I've said before, we are in, I was about to say dire need or desperate need. We really do need a Sanhedrin because there's so many things happening today that just don't specifically fit perfectly into a Torah issue where there's a need for a decision to be made because we are living in a very different world than when they wrote these things. I mean, just physically, we have things going on that they never would have dealt with, like electricity and businesses that are open. Like the fact that right now it is Shabbat, but all of you that are watching online are watching using internet, and that's got people working there somewhere doing the internet, and the power company giving you power and all the other stuff that's happening. So is that okay, and how does that work? And shouldn't somebody make a decision about that? We have done that here, and we've talked about it in the past. What I'm just saying is, wouldn't it be nice to have a body that could make those decisions and codify it and write it down and we could all understand it? And I think that's important that we have that at some point, okay? All right, Ashley.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
Shabbat Shalom.
I was wondering, yesterday we had a series of events with my youngest child. She's really testing us. And I say this because it's going to give you...
Because she's, just like I said, she's 2.
Like 3. And she's exactly me.
Okay? She's 3 and she's you. There you go.
Yeah. But with that, yesterday she grabbed like a Costco bottle of oil and olive oil and my pantry size pink salt and poured the olive oil on the salt and spilled that in my kitchen. I say that because as I was cleaning it up, I said, haSatan, is this all you got? Because I caught myself going, hey, I didn't lose my shalom. It's about to be, sundown. I'm cool. And then I went and sat down at the kitchen table. We started eating. The dishwasher was going, and soap started coming out of it. And my husband was like, what did you say earlier when you mumbled? I was like, haSatan, is this all you got? And he's like, please don't say things like that. And I was like, well.
Challenge accepted.
I looked at him, I'm like, I'm not losing my shalom over this. It's not a big deal. And it started me thinking, going, if I'm complacent and I'm content, is it okay to egg on haSatan? No? Because
No. Listen, you basically want to say things like, it doesn't matter what you do, I'm good. Okay? I'm good. I'm not worried about it. Not like, is that all you got? Asking him to do more. Just saying, look, you're not gonna disturb my peace. You might as well just not even bother. Okay? He may test you more to see, and Abba may let him to see if you were, meaning what you said. And did you maintain your shalom?
Yes.
Well, then that's what the whole point was. So Abba allowed it. By the way, might not have been haSatan. Maybe Abba caused it to see if you were serious.
So
maybe he wanted to see if you were going to maintain your shalom.
And if that was him, would that have been back talking?
No, I'm just saying look, it's just foolish talk, okay? Sometimes we say things that's just foolishness. And you realize now that was probably foolish talk, okay?
Okay, and then my second question with that is, if I'm feeling complacent and I feel like I want to push because I know I don't have all the things I need out of me and I haven't worked on them because I haven't seen them yet, how do I get those things out? Or
don't worry, he'll bring them out.
Okay.
That's not an issue. If you got anything in there, he'll bring it out. That's the reason you're here, right? Is to get all that stuff out so that we can deal with it. All right, Kay.
Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi.
Shabbat
Shalom, everyone.
Okay, you got to put that right there because you don't talk very loud. So right up on the
I'm Kay from Japan, if anyone was wondering.
Kay, formerly from Japan.
Formerly from Japan. Now I'm here, and I'm really happy to be here. Thank you guys so much. I did want to take a second to say thank you to everybody for loving me and encouraging me as I'm transitioning. It's overwhelming, the love from here and from all over the world, all the ladies on Marco Polo. It's an overwhelming feeling. Today when Elder Billy was talking, I felt that, and I was like, okay, you know me, I bury everything. I'm like, I'll deal with it later. Then Mercy came, and I was like, okay, I feel it. Then Waffle with the not dealing with your stuff is a cop-out. I'm like, okay, Father, I get it. I'm like, I'll deal with it later. I'm up here, and you probably have to smack me in the head because it's all the things I know, but it's just the doing part. It's just the letting go. I take things in and then I burying it, and then it just comes out. And I have a hard time letting go. I feel like I can't let go. You have bills, you have a house, you have kids, you have all these things that you need to be doing, and that's just not the most important thing. Your feelings are not the most important thing. You're hurt, and someone's gonna hurt you again, deal with it later. So you might have to knock some sense into me because I'm struggling letting go and letting people help me and letting people love on me.
Well, it sounds like you're already heading in the right direction. You're starting to let that happen. So it's just a process. Over time, you're going to get there. Okay. Just keep doing what you're doing, and little by little, you'll let people help you more, and you'll need it less, and you'll kind of deal with and cope with your emotions more. It's a process. And plus, because of what you're dealing with, a little bit of that is also the mourning process. When there's a loss of some sort, it takes a while to actually process, usually at least somewhere in that range of about a year to really kind of process. So, and it hasn't even been that. So, what you're struggling with and what you're going through. So it'll keep getting better. It'll keep getting better. Especially because you're here and you can have all of this around you to encourage you and to love on you, so, okay?
I also wanted to tell you thank you because it's been 2 or 3 years and you've been so patient with me, and I just really, really appreciate all that you've done, and I'm not gonna cry. That's it. I just really want to say thank you, Rabbi.
You're so welcome. All right. I don't think I should let you ask a question.
Why?
Because you didn't want zone 1. Ooh.
Oh my gosh. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, to be fair, she wanted Be Set Apart Part 2 is what she wanted. She really wanted to get to the rest of the teaching. So she wasn't so much against zone 1, but I just couldn't resist teaching you for that.
You were in there. How'd Billy go tell on me? Really?
Yeah, he did.
Okay.
Wait. Has he not said enough on the mic that if you tell him, he's going to tell me? Okay, you should all know that by now. All right, go ahead.
Okay, so...
Besides, you asked me to thumbs up and I didn't.
I know.
So I found out what that was.
I know. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
all right.
So in regards to talk less and do more with being set apart, what % would you say would be action as far as when you get a revelation, when he reveals something to you? Okay, now, you know how you talk about, okay, great, he revealed it, what are you going to do? What % would you say would be, okay, now an action needs to follow this revelation? Things that may be less obvious than, okay, you revealed Shabbat, let me do Shabbat, you know?
Okay, so when he reveals stuff to you, first of all, I want to be careful with this because some of you think he reveals a whole bunch of stuff to you that he's not necessarily the one revealing it, and it's, so you want to make sure that it actually is scripturally grounded revelation, that something was revealed to you that you're not doing in your life or that you are doing that you need to stop doing, whatever it is, right? And then you want to address that in the ASAP, and as soon as it's possible to make that change, make that adjustment, walk in that new understanding. Okay? So, you happen to have Sabbath revealed to you and you work a job that works on Saturday. Well, I'm not telling you should necessarily just quit your job immediately. You should go to your boss immediately and see if there's any way to make it work. And if the boss says no, well, then you need to be, as soon as possible, changing jobs. In other words, getting that fixed. And so there should be an urgency to apply what he's revealed to you, because he revealed it to you so you would do it. Did that help?
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And then will you simplify, I'm in the heart of the matter, and you always mention having a pickle-sucking face when he reveals something to you, but also I think it was Torah Tuesday, it's all blur, where you were mentioning motivation and understanding comes after you do. However, even like for myself, when he first revealed Shabbat to me, my heart had a pickle-sucking face because I'm like, I'm giving up my Saturdays. What is this about? I don't know what to do. I'm going to sit in the house for 12 hours looking at paint dry. It was rough. So yes, my heart had a pickle-sucking face. Maybe not my face, but I did it, not necessarily because you want to do it, if that makes sense.
Okay. I saw a quote, a lot of you guys know Jocko Willink, right? Jocko says, don't expect to be motivated every day to get out there and make things happen. You won't be. Don't count on motivation, count on discipline. So you get something revealed to you, you have that, and I don't say pickle-sucking face, I say you look like you're weaned on a pickle. Okay, same idea. And so you're not excited about it. That's where discipline comes in. And then in the doing, you recognize the value and there's a motivation that comes. Okay? It's the same thing as Jocko's probably talking about things in life like getting in shape and working out or doing something in your career. And so I know many times my best workouts were when I went to the gym and I didn't want to go to the gym. I wasn't motivated, wasn't interested, kind of had the sucking the pickle face about, I don't really want to go. But it's in the doing that the rest comes, the emotion comes and all that stuff. That's where discipline comes in. And we're very disciplined, what's the word? I would say we're just very undisciplined, okay? There's a famine of discipline in our lives. We're just very, very empty on discipline. We're weak in that area. So, when you first heard about Shabbat, you had all these things come up to try to disturb your motivation to do, and that's what discipline says. He said to do it, I'm going to do it. Right now, I'm not getting it. I'm not excited about it. It's not something that appeals to me the way I understand it right now. I'm going to be sitting around and just staring at the ceiling, whatever you thought at that time. But then in the doing came everything else.
So with the heart of it,
Yeah.
when you're talking about your heart, he knows your heart, and you're like, that's the scariest thing you should know. How does that relate? Are you just talking about people who you've been doing this for a while and you still have that?
No, your heart for him is why you did it anyway.
Okay.
See, I love you. You tell me Shabbat, because you popped my bubble, you tell me Shabbat is something I need to keep. So my heart for you is what makes me do, even if I don't want to do.